There are levels to absolutely everything in life. As with any skill, you start at the bottom, you work your way up, and if you're talented and have enough dedication, you might reach the absolute pinnacle of what is possible. Competitive bowling is no different. But the gap between each level is absolutely massive, and most people never make it past even the second or third level. And this is usually because they don't realize how much further there is to bowling. They might think they're pretty good when they average 180 in their house shot league, and this is simply because they've just no concept of how far that gap is from professional bowling. So to help make this subject a little more digestible, I mapped it into 7 different levels, from absolute beginners who just walked into the center for the first time, all the way up to the greatest to ever do it. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where you are in this and what it actually takes to move up a level. And fair warning, this is probably going to be an ego check of some kind. Level 1, the first timer. This is the starting point, with basically no exceptions for anybody. You walk into the bowling center, probably for someone's birthday party or casual night out, you grab a house ball that sort of fits your hand, and you try to throw it down the lane. At this level, you have no idea what you're doing, and you're fully aware of that fact. While people at the higher levels are starting to have good swings and consistent mechanics, you're still figuring out the basics like how to hold the ball without dropping it. At this level, if you're at a birthday party, there might even be bumpers involved, and nobody's judging you because chances are everyone is equally bad. Your approach, if you can even call it that, is whatever feels natural. You're taking as many or as few steps as you feel is necessary. You might even be stopping before the line to swing the ball and release it, which effectively does nothing and cancels out the whole point of approaching in the first place. Scoring at this level is wildly inconsistent. You might bowl 60 one game and a 95 the next, and have no idea what you did different. Spares at this level are mostly luck. When you leave a single pin and actually convert it, it might feel like you won the lottery. Strikes feel like a miracle that happened not because of you, but despite of you, and you're still trying to knock down pins and just have a fun time at the birthday party or whatever you're doing. Obviously, you wouldn't have your own equipment at this level, so you're probably wearing those rental shoes that slide either way too much or far less than expected, which probably led to 1 or 2 moments where you nearly fell over. What separates this level from the next is very simple. You start bowling regularly instead of just once or twice a year. You decide that you actually want to get better instead of just participating in whatever is organized. You start thinking about bowling between sessions and maybe look up some basic videos. Many people never leave level 1, and there's a good chance that you watching have never bowled in your life or are at this level. They bowl a few times in their life, have fun, and never think about it seriously. And that's completely fine, because if at the end of the day that's all you want from bowling, that accomplishes your task. There's no shame in being casual. Level 2, the casual. You're bowling consistently now, maybe once or twice a month, maybe you've joined a weekly league with some friends or some coworkers. You've figured out the very basics, and you're starting to develop something that resembles a somewhat consistent approach, even if it's not good. At this level, you've probably bought your own bowling ball, which is a way bigger deal than it sounds. Chances are the ball you bought isn't those high-performance reactive resin balls you see on TV every week, but it's probably just an entry-level plastic or weak reactive that cost you about $80 to $100. But at the end of the day, it fits your hand and it's yours. This makes you feel far more serious about bowling, even if your average hasn't jumped up drastically since you started. There's something about having your own equipment that changes how you approach the game. By now, your approach is repeatable. You're starting to understand basic timing, even if you can't explain what it is or why it matters. You have a target down lane, and even if you don't hit it every time, you at least have something you're aiming at. Your footwork isn't great, but at least it's there. The coordination aspect is also starting to click. You're starting to understand why your arm swing needs to go the way it does, and you begin to realize that balance at the line somewhat matters. Scoring is improving consistently. You're averaging somewhere between 110 and 150, maybe a bit more or less. Depending on how athletic you are and how quickly you pick up new skills, you probably learned how to hook the ball, and sometimes you can string a few strikes together. Spares are wildly inconsistent, but you're making them on occasion. You've maybe even broken 200 once or twice if you're extremely lucky. The big development from level 1 to level 2 is understanding that bowling has a technique. You might start watching other bowlers in your center and noting what they do. You might start watching some YouTube videos about bowling and realize your approach is a mess. You're learning that there is a right and a wrong way to do things, even if you can't do it correct the first time. Equipment at this pace doesn't really matter. Your entry-level ball works fine for what you're doing. It hooks a little bit, and you've figured out how much it hooks roughly, and you've probably also foregone the rental shoes and bought your own pair. But the biggest thing that separates this level from the level above it is making the conscious decision to improve rather than just bowl for fun every few weeks. You start practicing specific things instead of keeping score. At the next level, you might find yourself practicing an hour just on spares alone, and you might think about your bowling between sessions, seeing what went right and what went wrong. Overall, a lot of people will stay at level 2 for a long time. You can enjoy bowling and compete in a casual league where the emphasis is more on getting drunk and trash talking rather than score, and that's perfectly fine if that's all you want from it. But for those who want more and want to compete at a higher level, level 3 is a huge step in the right direction. Level 3, you're the dedicated league bowler. By this point, you're probably moving on to a more competitive league with people who care about getting better, not just those casual beer leagues where half the teams don't show. You might start caring about your average, and you might even track spares on an app like Lane Talk. At this level, you probably own multiple bowling balls. You've got a strike ball and a spare ball at the bare minimum, maybe a benchmark for medium conditions and something a little stronger for heavier oil. You might not understand the differences between each one, but at least you're starting to know that there's a difference between them. Something you probably also realize is that there's a difference between symmetric and asymmetric and solid and pearl. Your approach is also very repeatable now, at least compared to the previous level, and you've worked on your game a lot, either through coaching or by watching content. Your timing is probably consistent, even if it isn't great, and you have a consistent release point where you can hit your target arrow or board more often than not. Your balance is also a lot better than level 2, and you're not falling off every single shot or struggling to stay upright. The overall execution at this level is improved dramatically from the lower levels. You're generating decent ball speed and creating some rev rate, although your rotation might be a little random at times, and your ball should hook mostly predictably. Your release should be fairly clean and not perfect, but not a total mess either. And to the casual observer who's probably a non-bowler, you look like someone who knows how to bowl. The biggest shift, though, from level 2 to level 3 is understanding lane play. You realize that lanes play different on different nights, the different pairs differ from each other, even left to right, right to left, different side of the pairs. You know that fresh oil is different from the burn, and you start to try to make adjustments even if they don't fully work. You've probably never bowled on a sport shot or never really understood oil patterns, but you know they exist and that they matter. Here, your mental game is also developing, but it's rather inconsistent. You've learned how to deal with some pressure, like needing a mark in the 10th, but you still get nervous in those big moments. What separates this level from the next one, level 4, is the jump from understanding bowling intellectually to actually executing it at that higher level, and even under pressure. Here you might know what you're supposed to do, you can explain it, but you might not be able to execute it like you would at the higher levels. And to be honest, level 3 is nothing to be ashamed of. You can stay here forever and be proud of that. You're decently skilled at the end of the day, and you're better than most people who bowl on a somewhat regular basis. But the gap from this one to level 4 is enormous, and most people never even cross it. Level 4, the tournament bowler. By this point, you're starting to enter tournaments on a somewhat consistent basis, competing in your sport shot events, testing yourself against better competition. You might be spending weekends traveling to regional events for the PBA. At this point, you're likely treating bowling as a competitive pursuit and not just a social activity. At this level, you have your full arsenal. Not just 1 or 2, but upwards of 6 different bowling balls for different patterns or lane surfaces. You understand what each ball is supposed to do and pretty much when to use it. You know which balls are for the fresh, transition, and which ones are for the heavy burn. Your approach is pretty refined by this point, and you can probably execute rather efficiently. You generate good ball speed, maybe 15 to 18, maybe a bit more, and a decently high rev rate. You can repeat shot after shot without massive variation, and your timing is pretty great and your balance should be pretty solid by this point. You look like someone who really knows how to bowl when other people watch you. Many people who don't bowl will see someone at level 4 and think this is almost as good as it gets. However, the levels above it are a far greater gap, and you're probably aware of that. If you exist at level 4, your scoring is probably strong across multiple centers and different patterns. You're probably 220 plus in your average house shot league, which means you're one of the better bowlers in your area, if not the very best in your center. More importantly, you can probably maintain a 180 to 190 plus average on those sport patterns, which is a massive difference from house shot. You probably bowled 700s pretty regularly, and chances are you've shot more than one perfect game in an 800 series. Spares should be pretty much no problem for you, and you convert most of them pretty easily. The big development from level 3 to level 4 is mental toughness and consistency. You can execute your game when it matters, in the 10th frame of a close match, in those elimination rounds where you're just outside the cut and traveled hours to compete, and you've been in enough high-pressure situations where you know how to keep focus. You can control your breathing, manage your emotions, and execute. The lane play at this level is miles ahead of level 3. You can look at an oil pattern sheet before a tournament and have a reasonable idea of what equipment is going to come out of the bag and what adjustments might be made. What separates the jump from level 4 to level 5 is the jump to pro level consistency and the ability to compete against lower level pros without being completely left in the dust. You can shoot one good tournament and beat decent competition, but can you do it week after week? Can you maintain your level when you're bowling above 5 games in a block on a tough pattern? Can you compete against these guys who do this for a living? This is where many people plateau, and it's important to understand why. Because level 4 is starting to get close to the elite for an amateur. You can win local tournaments with decent fields, compete in regional events, and not feel outclassed. Making the jump to level 5, however, requires physical tools that just can't be taught, and a level of dedication that borders on heavily obsessive. The gap between level 4 and level 5 is probably one of the biggest gaps in all of bowling. It's the difference between being a very good amateur and being a professional. Most people never cross it no matter how hard they work, and that's okay. Even reaching level 4 is an achievement in that of itself and represents pretty good mastery of bowling. Level 5, the Regional Pro. By now, you're competing on the PBA Regional Tour or the international equivalent. You're good enough to cash in most professional events, occasionally at least, and probably making a little bit of money per year from tournament winnings. However, the money you're making at this level is probably not enough to quit your day job. You might win several regional titles over the course of your career, which is a massive accomplishment, even if it doesn't get that much attention. But you're not quite at the level where you can compete at the national tour and make a solid living. At this level, you have just about every bowling ball under the sun and know exactly what each does. You probably have relationships with ball companies if you're not signed. Your equipment choices are sophisticated and based on years of trial and error knowing what you like. Your approach and consistency are at a near professional level. And this is where an interesting split happens between the power players and the accurate players. You might be generating 400 to 500 RPMs if you're a power player, but if you're a more accurate player, you could probably get away with 350 or lower. And at this point, you should be able to control pretty much everything to do with your game, your release, your speed, and what's gonna happen down lane. At this point, you look professional when you bowl, which is exactly what you are. The physical execution is a level that most people can't even imagine. The huge difference between level 4 and level 5 is competing successfully against national tour professionals and not being out of your league. You can beat them on your best day, you've done it before, maybe multiple times. When the national tour is in the off season and the regional events are still happening and they show up to one, you're not intimidating because you know your game can hang with theirs, but you can't do it consistent enough to make a living on the national tour. You might beat them 2 or 3 times out of 10, but over a full season of competition, they're going to beat you more often than not. Your equipment knowledge is pretty much as good as it gets. Maybe the level above you has a higher knowledge, but it's pretty much impossible to go much further with it. What separates level 5 from level 6 is the ability to perform at the national level across an entire season while traveling and competing week after week. Regional pros, at the end of the day, have elite skills that can compete with tour pros and win. But those national tour regulars take those same skills and execute them at the highest possible level every single week for months at a time. That gap of consistency is enormous, and even though the skill gap might seem small, the consistency gap is huge. Level 6, the PBA Tour Regular. You're competing on the PBA Tour full-time now. This is now your full-time job. You travel to tournaments around 8 months out of the year to national level tournaments, and you're making cuts regularly, cashing consistently, and winning matches against the best players in the world. You might not be winning titles every single year, but you're a threat in every tournament you enter. And at this level, there's a level of fame that comes with it. People outside the PBA know and love your game at this point. This is usually because your physical game is the best in the world. You might not be the most powerful or the most accurate. You do everything in your game perfectly enough to compete with everyone around you. Your approach is as smooth and repeatable as it gets. Your release is something that other people watch and try to do. Your execution overall is at a level that is impossible to describe to people who haven't seen it in person. Versatility at this level is an absolute must, and you've probably mastered it by now. You know how to throw your ball and slow hook it across the entire lane, or throw it up the boards really fast. You know how to be smooth when you need it, how to loft it, how to keep firm, and how to just manipulate your ball in every single way possible. Scoring is hard to comprehend for anyone non-professional. You're averaging 210 plus on PBA Tour patterns, which is significantly harder than most people ever realize. Spare shooting should be basically automatic unless you face an impossible split. The biggest change from level 4 to 5 is adaptability in your mental game. You bowled thousands of professional games over competition, and you've learned how to handle the heat. Lane play at a professional level is crazy. You're changing the lanes during warm-up even, possibly adjusting it with urethane, and ironing in a razor-sharp ball motion at the end of the pattern. You adjust ahead of players at level 5, and you cash even when your A game isn't there. You're solving the puzzles that the people at lower levels are struggling with consistently. What separates level 6 from the final level is winning consistently. Tour regulars can win occasionally, maybe 2 to 6 titles in a career, maybe more if they have a few good years, but the GOATs win multiple titles across multiple seasons. Many great guys, like Ryan Schaefer, Ryan O'Page, and Mike Scroggins, have had great careers but never quite reached the absolute pinnacle of what's possible. These were amazing bowlers who were among the best in the world for years, and level 6 is still among the best to ever do it. It represents a great career that should make anyone proud. However, there's one last level, and that's what separates the good from the great. Level 7, the GOATs. The players here dominate their eras. They change how people think about the sport of bowling, and if you make it here, your name gets etched in the sport and mentioned every single time someone talks about the greatest to ever do it. You're excellent in some ways that separate you from everyone who came before and everyone competing now. Your physical game is so good, it's being studied by coaches and players all around the world. Your physical approach is the absolute peak of what's possible. Your weaknesses, if you have any, are so minor and so rarely exposed that they pretty much don't matter. Your execution is absolutely perfect, at least compared to every single person below you. You're repeating a complex motion thousands of times with razor-thin tweaks between shots and hitting your mark every single time. Your ball motion is predictable, powerful, and repeatable. You can make your game do exactly what you need in every situation. You have complete mastery over yourself and physical game. You might have put in an average over 220 plus across an entire season, not just any high-scoring tournament. You've probably shot 300 on TV, maybe even tens of times throughout qualifying rounds. You win matches when you're not on your A game, where most other people below you are at their peak performance. Your peaks are the greatest in your eras, and your lows are often better than most. To make it here, your mental game has to be unbreakable. You have to have won multiple majors, which requires being the best player in the world against the deepest fields in the world. You face elimination matches and found a way to win anyway. You've choked before, everyone has, but you've learned from it and it doesn't happen very often anymore. When someone makes their debut appearance on TV, you probably intimidate them if you face them. What defines level 7 isn't just skill, it's longevity or high peaks throughout years or decades. Earl Anthony won 43 titles and 6 Player of the Year awards in the 70s and 80s, by far having one of the greatest peaks in all of PBA history. Walter Ray Williams Jr. won 47 titles across 4 decades, maintaining his excellence from his 30s to his 60s, and that is incredible in that of itself. Jason Belmonte won 15 majors and 7 Player of the Year awards. These are careers that changed bowling history for good and will be discussed for generations after they end. At level 7, you're competing against history itself. Can you win more than the previous GOAT? Can you redefine what's possible? Can you be the greatest ever? These are the questions that separate level 7 from level 6. Very few people ever reach level 7 in any sport. In bowling, you could probably count them on 2 hands across the entire history of the sport. The names that appear in this tier are the names that define bowling greatness, the standards to which every other career possible is compared to. The rough truth is that level 7 might not even be achievable through work. You can be dedicated, talented, put all the hours in, but there's something that stops you from being the GOAT. There's a little something special to every GOAT candidate, and nobody knows exactly what it is. Is it mental toughness, your physical gifts, maybe luck? Whatever it is, very, very few people have it. But I want to end this video by asking, where are you? And let's be completely honest. Most people seeing this video are between level 1 and 4. Knowing my audience, you probably bowl regularly and you're trying to get better. That's a vast majority of the bowling population, and there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You can have a lifetime of enjoyment from bowling without ever getting past level 2. If you're at a higher level, say level 4 or 5, maybe even 6, you're very skilled and you put in some serious work to get there. You're better than 95 to 99% of people who bowl on a regular basis. You should be proud of that, even if you never win a national title or make it to level 7. And if you actually are at level 7, you know exactly where you are. You're living the dream that everyone else thinks about. You're doing what only a tiny fraction of bowlers will ever achieve. You've made it to the promised land. But the important thing about this explanation model is that each level requires significantly more work than the last. Going from level 1 to level 2 is relatively easy with practice. 2 to 3 requires some dedicated effort and some money. Going from 3 to 4 requires significantly more time and natural ability. 4 to 5 requires gifts that most people just don't have. And going from 6 or even further to 7 might require something that can't be taught or learned. It might feel like climbing a mountain, and to be honest, it kind of is, but one day you'll look back at how far you've come and be absolutely blown out of the water. But that's about all I've got time for today. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. What level are you? And maybe what you'd like to see next. So leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys next time.